Sometimes, the smallest detail in the busiest place can change everything. The emergency room that night was loud with ringing phones, rolling gurneys, and the low hum of medical machinery. But one quiet little girl would become the center of a story no one in that hospital would ever forget. And before I take you inside that room, let me say this. If you believe every child deserves to be safe and protected, make sure you like this story and subscribe for more powerful true-to-life tales where justice finds its way, even in the darkest corners. Because what happened next wasn't just another ER shift. It was a turning point that revealed how quickly a routine visit can unravel into something far more sinister. I remember the air smelled faintly of antiseptic mixed with the metallic tang of worry that clung to every parent and guardian who passed through those automatic doors. Families came in with sprained ankles, broken bones, sudden fevers. But that evening, when Emily, a small 8-year-old girl with tangled hair and wide brown eyes, was rushed in, something felt different before anyone even knew her name. Her uncle, a wiry man named Daniel with restless hands, stood by her side, speaking quickly, too quickly, about how she'd fallen down the stairs. Clumsy kid, always running around. He muttered to the triage nurse, but his voice had an edge, like he wanted the explanation accepted without question. Emily didn't cry, not even when the intake nurse gently touched her scraped knees. Instead, she clutched a stuffed rabbit so tightly that her knuckles turned white, her silence heavy enough to raise suspicion in anyone who cared to listen. Nurse Alicia, who'd worked in pediatrics before being assigned to the ER, was the first to notice. She bent down to Emily's level, her tone gentle, eyes soft, asking in a whisper, "Sweetheart, does it hurt here?" Emily shook her head but kept her gaze fixed on the floor, as if afraid that eye contact might betray her. And that's when Alicia saw it. Faint circular marks along Emily's wrists, not fresh, but fading bruises that told a story no staircase could explain. The noise of the ER seemed to blur into the background as Alicia's mind snapped to attention. Over the years, she'd seen plenty of injuries that didn't match the explanation. Broken arms from roughhousing, black eyes from bumping into a table. And too often the truth was darker than anyone wanted to believe. Still, she kept her face calm, masking the storm of suspicion rising inside her. "We'll get you checked out," she said softly, brushing a strand of hair away from Emily's face. And the girl flinched so sharply it sent a shiver down Alicia's spine. Meanwhile, Daniel hovered like a shadow, peering into the exam room doorway, his voice growing sharper. "How long is this going to take? She just tripped, that's all. Can we get on with it?" His impatience wasn't just concern. It felt defensive, almost rehearsed, as if the story had been told too many times already. Alicia nodded politely, but she made a mental note. Something was wrong here, very wrong. In the ER, small decisions can mean life or death, sometimes for the body, sometimes for the truth. Alicia decided this was one of those moments. She moved Emily gently onto the exam table, her hands steady though her heart was beating faster. Beneath the fluorescent lights, more marks became visible, on her shins, faint bruises shaped in patterns that didn't match a fall. They were too symmetrical, too deliberate. Alicia kept her questions light, asking about school, about the stuffed rabbit's name, anything to help Emily feel safe enough to speak. Emily's lips trembled, but she said nothing, only hugging the rabbit tighter as her uncle's voice boomed from the hallway. "Hey, she's fine, right? Kids bruise easy." Alicia caught the doctor's eye, a silent understanding passing between them. The doctor began charting, but Alicia knew this wasn't just a medical case anymore. It was potentially a matter of safety, maybe even survival. And as she watched Emily shrink into herself with every sound her uncle made, she understood. This little girl had been carrying secrets too heavy for her small shoulders. The night had only just begun, but already, Alicia knew it would not be an ordinary shift. It would be the night where one nurse's instincts collided with the truth hidden in a child's silence, and nothing, absolutely nothing, would be the same again. The hum of the ER usually carried a rhythm of urgency mixed with reassurance. Nurses moving briskly, doctors explaining procedures, machines beeping steadily. But that night, under the bright sterile lights, the air around Emily felt heavy, like the calm before a storm no one wanted to name aloud. Nurse Alicia stayed by her side, while the doctor examined her, every fiber of her being tuned to the little girl's quietness, to the way she winced at sudden movements, to the way she stiffened whenever her uncle's shadow stretched across the doorway. Daniel kept pacing outside, restless, demanding updates, his voice laced with irritation masked as concern. She just fell, for crying out loud. He barked at the desk clerk at one point. Why are they acting like she's made of glass? His tone was sharp enough that even the security guard glanced up, but Alicia focused on Emily, lowering her voice to the gentlest whisper. Emily, sweetheart, can you tell me what happened before you came here? The little girl's lips parted as if to answer, but then she looked toward the doorway and immediately shook her head, her tiny hand tightening around the stuffed rabbit until its seams creaked. That one reaction told Alicia more than words ever could. She excused herself for a moment, stepping into the hall to find the attending physician, and together they exchanged quiet observations. The symmetry of the marks, the inconsistencies in the uncle's story, the child's fearful silence. Both knew this wasn't simply a matter of treatment. It was a matter of protection. The hospital had procedures for this, and Alicia had followed them before, but never with her heart beating this fast. She pulled out her phone and discreetly alerted the on-call social worker, while signaling security to keep a closer watch on the uncle without escalating things too soon. Back inside the exam room, Alicia tried again, sitting on the edge of the bed so Emily wouldn't feel so small under the glare of the overhead lamp. You're safe here, she said softly, brushing the child's hair back in a way that asked permission rather than took it. Emily hesitated, then whispered, almost inaudibly. He says I have to be quiet. The words were fragile, barely formed, but they landed like thunder in Alicia's chest. She knew then that the bruises told a story of repetition, not accident. Minutes later, the physician confirmed what Alicia had already suspected. The injuries were consistent with repeated blunt force and restraint, not a single fall. The words hung heavy in the room, and as the social worker arrived, Alicia stood at Emily's side, determined not to let the little girl face this alone. Outside, Daniel's agitation grew. He checked his watch, argued with the receptionist, even raised his voice when told he had to wait. I have rights as her guardian, he snapped, and the way he emphasized the word rights made everyone nearby shift uncomfortably. Security began circling closer, their radios crackling softly, waiting for the word. Alicia leaned down to Emily, holding her gaze gently. You're very brave, you know that, she said. And you don't have to be scared anymore. There are people here who want to help you. Emily's eyes filled with tears, but for the first time, she didn't look away. She whispered, Will Mama be mad? The question broke Alicia's heart into 1,000 pieces, because it meant Emily believed love and fear lived side by side in her world. No, sweetheart, Alicia assured her. Your mama would want you safe. That's all that matters. And in that moment, Alicia felt a surge of determination that left no room for hesitation. She would not let this little girl walk back into danger, not tonight, not ever. She stepped into the hall just as 2 police officers arrived, their uniforms crisp against the chaos of the ER, their presence like a quiet promise of protection. The social worker briefed them quickly, and together they prepared to approach Daniel. From where? Alicia stood. She could see him stiffen the moment the officers appeared, his face twisting in a mix of anger and disbelief. He started to protest, his words loud and defensive, but by then the truth was no longer his to hide. Inside the exam room, Emily clutched her rabbit and looked toward the doorway as the muffled voices rose. Alicia took her hand, steady and warm. Don't be afraid, she whispered. This is where everything changes. The confrontation unfolded like a storm rolling through a quiet sky, sudden, loud, and impossible to ignore. Daniel's voice rose above the steady sounds of the ER, sharp with indignation, as the 2 officers stepped closer, their calm authority clashing with his growing panic. This is ridiculous, he snapped, throwing his hands in the air. She fell down the stairs. I told you she's clumsy. Kids get bruises all the time. But the officers weren't swayed, and the waiting room had grown silent as patients and families watched, sensing that something much darker than a household accident was unraveling. Alicia, standing just inside Emily's exam room, tightened her grip on the little girl's hand, knowing that children often listen hardest when adults think they aren't paying attention. Emily's wide eyes flicked toward the hallway where her uncle's voice echoed, and she whispered, "He's mad." Alicia leaned close, steady, firm. "He can't hurt you anymore," she promised. And though she wanted to believe her own words as much as she wanted Emily to, she made sure her voice left no doubt. Outside, the social worker calmly explained the medical findings to the officers. The bruises inconsistent with a fall, the symmetrical marks suggesting restraint, the child's fearful demeanor, and Daniel's protest began to falter, his excuses piling up like cards in a crumbling house. When one of the officers finally told him he was being detained for further questioning, his face twisted with disbelief, like he had never considered a world where people might see through him. He tried to lunge toward the exam room, shouting Emily's name, but security intercepted him swiftly, their practiced movements firm yet professional, and in that moment Emily shrank back against Alicia's side, burying her face in the nurse's scrubs, as if hiding from a nightmare come alive. The officers led him away in handcuffs, his voice echoing down the hall, angry, sputtering, hollow, and then, as the automatic doors closed behind them, the ER seemed to exhale all at once, the tension breaking like glass under pressure. For the first time that night, Emily's silence wasn't from fear but from relief, a kind of stunned quiet, as if her small body couldn't quite process what safety felt like. Alicia knelt to meet her eyes, brushing a gentle hand across the girl's shoulder. "You did so well," she whispered. "You were so brave." Emily blinked, her lashes wet, and then, in a voice barely louder than the hum of the heart monitor, she asked, "Can I stay here tonight? Not go home?" The words struck deep, not because of the request itself, but because of the truth behind it. Home was no longer a safe place for her, and she knew it. Alicia's throat tightened, but she smiled, reassuring. "You'll be safe, Emily. We'll make sure of it." And she meant every word. The social worker stepped forward, outlining the next steps: protective custody, a safe foster placement, and immediate follow-up with Child Protective Services. But Alicia kept her focus on Emily, answering her questions about small things instead: whether her rabbit could stay with her, yes, whether she would see her mama soon, that would be arranged carefully, and whether the police would take her uncle far away, they would, and she wouldn't have to see him tonight, not ever again unless she wanted to speak with safe adults around her. Slowly, Emily's shoulders began to relax, the tight grip on her stuffed rabbit easing just enough to let her fingers smooth its frayed ears. By the time the night wore on and the ER shifted back into its usual rhythm of emergencies and recoveries, Emily was tucked into a hospital bed with a blanket pulled up to her chin, the social worker seated nearby, paperwork spread across her lap, and Alicia lingering at the doorway for one last look. The sight of that small child, fragile yet unbroken, stirred something in Alicia that she knew would stay with her long after the shift ended. Because in that sterile hospital wing, justice had started with a glance, a nurse noticing what others might have missed, a child whispering just enough truth to crack the silence, and a team willing to act before excuses hardened into tragedy. As Alicia finally stepped into the cool night air after her shift, the memory of Emily's whisper clung to her. "He says I have to be quiet." But tonight, that silence had been broken, and in its place was a promise that Emily's story would no longer be defined by fear, but by the moment someone finally listened and refused to look away.